Now, the other day I made a video talking about the upcoming interview in Empire magazine with Rian Johnson, one that's apparently going to cover or talk about his whole career, which will include revisiting The Last Jedi 5 years later. And in that video I talked about how I hope he'll show a touch of humility, that he'll acknowledge his movie sort of broke the Star Wars fanbase, and that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't as perfect as he's kind of claimed it to be, when in the past he said there is nothing he would change about the film. Which I think it's interesting to point out is a much different attitude from George Lucas, who once said, "Films are never finished, they're only abandoned," basically meaning there's always things that could be tweaked or changed or added or improved, that they're never perfect, but eventually you do have to release them to the public. But anyway, just today, Empire released what we'll call a juicy tidbit from that interview, done of course to help sell issues of the magazine when it comes out on September 1st. And since I've already had a great many people ask me what I think about what he said in this little tidbit, I figured I'd make a quick video. And I say quick because I'm sure I'll cover the full article in a couple days, and I'm already having bad flashbacks to the time it felt like I was talking about Rian Johnson in every other video I did. And so, to get right to it, let's take a look at the clip from the article and what was said by him in it. And of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson said, "I'm even more proud of it 5 years on. When I was up at bat, I really swung at the ball. The film," he says, "is not just a Star Wars movie. It's a movie about Star Wars and what it means to fans, himself included. I think it's impossible for any of us to approach Star Wars without thinking about it as a myth that we were raised with and how that myth, that story, baked itself into us and affected us," Johnson explains. "The ultimate intent was not to strip away. The intent was to get to the basic fundamental power of myth, and ultimately I hope the film is an affirmation of the power of the myth of Star Wars in our lives." The article and he then go on to say, "The final images of the movie, to me, are not deconstructing the myth of Luke Skywalker. They're building it, and they're him embracing it," the director explains. "They're him absolutely defying the notion of throw away the past and embracing what actually matters about his myth and what's going to inspire the next generation. So for me, the process of stripping away is always in the interest of getting to something essential that really matters." Okay, so first of all, I just love the contradiction. He says the movie is not just a Star Wars movie, it's about Star Wars and the myth we all connect to, which is more or less a roundabout way of saying it is a deconstruction of Star Wars. But then he goes on to say it's not about deconstructing the myth of Luke Skywalker, it's about building it up. But the real question I've always kind of had about the film is, why does the myth of Luke Skywalker need this sort of reconstruction and or affirmation, either in universe or outside of it? I mean, in both, it's only been 30 to 40 years since Luke and or the films did what he and they did and became a legend and or a myth in the Star Wars galaxy and became the largest franchise our real world has probably ever known. And even Rey in the first film of the new trilogy, living on a backwater planet like Jakku, has heard of and knows of Luke Skywalker. She knows about his stories and seems to be awed by them. In other words, he's certainly not forgotten or in need of being built up again in story. I'm pretty sure he's hailed as a hero throughout the entirety of the New Republic he helped reestablish. I'm sure the children of the galaxy are taught all about him in schools, or that he'd be talked about by parents who remember the Iron Fist of the Empire to their children. Similar to how, in the real world, parents sit their kids down and show them the original trilogy, letting the legend of Luke live on in our world that way. Not to mention, why does it need, again, this sort of affirmation right in the same story it first occurred in? Why do you deconstruct Star Wars in what could be considered the very same story it started in? Isn't it a little strange that right in the Skywalker saga itself, in the 8th of 9 episodes, the one right before the epic finale of the whole thing, or what should be, that you would deconstruct it instead of simply set up that finale, especially after the previous part, episode 7, began a new third chapter, if you will, and introduced all sorts of new questions, characters, and threats? Why is it that all those things in episode 8 suddenly take a backseat to building the myth of Luke Skywalker that the second chapter of the saga, the original trilogy, already did a phenomenal job at? To the point where, again, Luke Skywalker has got to be one of the most well-known beings in that galaxy, and where he's arguably one of the greatest and most recognizable fictional characters of our time in the real world. And this is to say nothing of the fact that in order to carry out this deconstruction, everything bad that happens to Luke to change him so he can be built up again has to happen off-screen. It'd be one thing if you earn the fall of Luke Skywalker first, but instead all we know of it is his nephew turned to the dark side one night and that broke him to the point where he gave up on anything and everything else and allowed the First Order and the Sith to rise again. And when you think about it, it isn't all that different from what we have seen done to Obi-Wan Kenobi, how his legacy is now tarnished by the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which showed he had the opportunity to end Darth Vader once and for all, but chose to let him live, despite saying, "I will do what I must," at the start of their fight, which I thought implied he really was, or intended to, we all know he can't kill Vader, but that he intended to end him this time if given the chance, especially after saying earlier that it was him or me. And so now we have Luke who, despite knowing about the return of the Sith, which the book Shadows of the Sith very much confirms he did, he sat on an island for 6 years and pitied himself and let the First Order and the Sith run wild when he could have done something about it. That blood is on his hands the same way the blood shed by Vader is now on Kenobi's. Way to go, Lucasfilm. What a way to build upon the legends of these great characters. And really, to me, the idea that Johnson thought he could or should tear down the legacy of Luke Skywalker in order to rebuild it better and stronger, I guess, or in order to examine the myth that is Star Wars, it's kind of arrogance. He could have added to the story of Luke. Instead, he kind of redid it. The same arrogance we see out of so many writers these days who take classic and beloved stories and or characters created by true legends and think they can do better. We're very much seeing it or hearing about it with Amazon's upcoming The Rings of Power series, where the showrunners and actors have talked about how it needs to change to fit modern times, that it has to be a reflection of the modern world, which is akin to essentially claiming Tolkien's work needs fixing, that it isn't timeless, and that it cannot be enjoyed as is today by anyone and everyone. Despite the fact that the first time I read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy was in the early 90s, some 40 to 50 years after they'd been written, and I had zero problem connecting with them because, simply put, they are timeless. It did not matter that he, Tolkien, and myself have lived radically different lives or had radically different life experiences, that he lived and wrote them in a way different world from the one I grew up in and live in now, that our lives never even overlapped, that he died a few years before I was even born, yet I was still captivated by them in a way no other book had before or has since. And I mean, just imagine the audacity it takes for these showrunners on the Rings of Power to even remotely imply they could in any way do it better than Tolkien. Imagine standing on the shoulder of a giant like Tolkien to look out upon the awe, wonder, and beauty that is the world of Middle-earth he created, and instead of being humbled by it and wanting to share that amazing vision and work with the world as accurately as you possibly can, like Peter Jackson once did with the Lord of the Rings film trilogy, you instead think to yourself, yeah, I can do better than this. This thing needs some modernizing. The same way I guess Rian Johnson looked at Luke Skywalker and thought, yeah, his story needs to be reaffirmed by me and my perfect movie. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. I said this was going to be a short video, and I tried to hold to that, but I guess I had a bit more to say. Anyway, do take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any and all of this. Tell me what you think about what Johnson said, or what you think about the upcoming The Rings of Power series. Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars and some Lord of the Rings. And until next time, thanks for watching.